welcome back to Keto Homestead with Jess. You guys, grab you a cup of coffee, a cup of hot chocolate, whatever, and a cozy blanket. Snuggle up and let's read Wings of a Dream, Chapter 1. October 1918, Rebecca Grace. If you don't hurry, we're going to be late for the lecture. Mama refrained from shouting. Though her voice carried easily up the stairs and into the bedroom, ladies didn't raise their voices after all. Coming, Mama, I pinned my wide-brimmed hat over my light brown hair before turning my head from side to side, trying to get the whole view in the small looking glass mounted on the wall. The hat wasn't the latest style, but it would do, at least for Downingtown, Oklahoma. Thankfully, that Mama had relented to skirts above my ankles. I raced down the stairs, hopping over the final step, then stopped to catch my breath before heading outside to meet Mama and Daddy. In spite of my excitement, I forced my feet to carry me with the slow dignity Mama expected of a young woman just turned 19. Climbing into the back seat of the buggy, I cast a gaze back at the crude shed that housed my brothers, Tin Lizzie, and heaved a sigh. We could have Will's car, Mama. We could take Will's car, Mama. Arrive in style like Mrs. Thacker. Mama harumphed her disapproval, even though I knew in her mind Mrs. Thacker had the last word on everything of value in culture and society. Her husband insists she ride in that thing, but she'd prefer a quiet, dependable convey. I pressed my lips together to hold back a comment as Daddy signaled the horse and we jerked forward. I didn't believe Miss Thatcher held the reservations Mama attributed to her. Miss Thatcher had lived in the modern world far beyond the farmlands of Oklahoma. If it hadn't been for her husband taking over the bank in town, she wouldn't have chosen to settle in Downingtown, I felt for sure. I expect your help tonight, Rebecca Grace. Others will be here to improve their minds. We Downingtown Women's Forum members have as our duty to facilitate that effort. Yes, ma'am. I rummaged through my handbag, trying to hide the smile tugging at my lips. Mama might be concerned with everyone's intellect, but my intentions weren't quite so noble. Tonight, I intend to make sure Arthur Sampson understood my desire to get out of this town and see the world with him. Daddy let us off at the front door of the schoolhouse. Light shone from every window, keeping the growing darkness at bay. A large automobile idled nearby, but I couldn't see who sat behind the wheel, Arthur or Miss Thatcher, so I followed Mama inside. Thank heavens you're here, Margaret. Excuse me. Miss Thatcher snailed towards Mama, gloved hands meeting Mama's shoulders for a moment as their cheeks almost touched. Then Miss Thatcher pulled away. People will begin arriving shortly. Mama sat her handbag in a seat on the front row. What should I do to help? Nothing at the moment. We'll greet people as they arrive. Maybe help them find a seat. Of course, I'll introduce Dr. Whitmere. My attention worn from their conversation, I couldn't muster the same enthusiasm for hearing a theological professor's lecture. The door opened again. The two potted ferns here hid his face, but I knew it was Arthur. No one else in Downingtown these days wore the tall boots and brown uniform of a soldier. Put those up, Miss Thatcher told her nephew, one on either side of the podium. My gaze followed Arthur up the aisle, admiring his purposeful stride, his strong arms. He sat down the plants as directed. "That's fine," Miss Thatcher said. "Now come say hello to Miss Hendricks and Rebecca." He turned towards us, removing his hat as his lips rose in a lazy grin. White teeth glistened against sun-darkened skin, as did his closely chopped hair, the color of sunshine. "So nice to see you again, Miss Hendrickson, Miss Rebecca." I stood straightened and grinned right back. Voices beyond the door drew Mama and Miss Thatcher toward the entrance. The 3 other members of the Women's Forum bustled inside and exchanged greetings as Arthur came to stand beside me. My insides melted like butter on hot biscuits as he gazed into my eyes. It had been the same since the first moment we'd met, nearly 3 weeks ago, when he'd come to Downington to visit his aunt and uncle. It wasn't like other boys I'd known. He didn't trude along in dirty fields. He soared above them, a college graduate, an aspiring aviator, a man of the world. The fact that he paid attention to a country bumpkin like me set my head spinning and my heart pounding. His eyes never left mine. Though people filed into the room around us, I didn't want to let the moment go. Not yet. I laced my fingers together and took note of listening ears. Listening toward him, I asked, "Do you have a seat yet, Miss Sampson?" He leaned in too and winked. I'd hoped to forego this pleasure together. He looked toward the door and then back at me, his invitation clear. I bit my bottom lip and glanced at Mama. She stood on one side of the entrance, Miss Thatcher on the opposite, while the other ladies filtered around, leading people to the empty seats. No one took notice of us. Arthur put his hand on my elbow and urged me towards the back corner of the room. His smooth voice wrapped around me like silk. "Shaw, my Aunt Annabelle had sent for my high school graduation. What about you?" His voice was low in tone and volume. "Are you pinning to hear a lecture this evening?" I bit down a nervously giggle as Arthur's lip curved into another grin. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Sit with me on the front steps. It's our last chance to talk. I leave for Texas in the morning." At that moment, Miss Thatcher swept towards the front of the room, Mama following close behind. Before Miss Thatcher could turn to face the gathered crowd, Arthur and I slipped out the door and into the twilight. I settled on the middle of the 3 steps, straightened my skirt, and tucked my shoes up under the hem. As Arthur walked into the schoolyard and lit a cigarette, the rumble of voices slipped across the still air. A smatter of clapping. By the time the droning began, Arthur had ground his growling stub into the dirt and lounged beside me, leaning back on his elbows. This time, next week, I should be up in a plane. His head tripled back as if he could see himself up in the sky now, first over Texas and then over France or Germany. I followed his gaze to the heavens, thinking of the many times I had, as a child, wished upon the first star of evening. Now I believe God directed my path, but I prayed that path included Arthur. "I wish I could fly up there with you." "Do you?" Arthur sat up a little bit, his laughing eyes rolling over my face. "Wouldn't you be afraid?" I shook my head, remembering hours, days, years of yearning to be free from housework and gardens and livestock. Free from Mama's scorching looks and sharp tongue. Even since I'd graduated high school, I'd dreamed of leaving this tiny, boring town behind. I want to go places, do things. I want a life full of more than planting and harvesting and chores. A life worth living. "I could teach you to fly an airplane," he said. The stars winked at me from above. I cocked my head and tried to imagine soaring above the ground all on my own. My stomach somersaulted. Maybe you should teach me to drive a motor car before I attempt a plane. Our laughter mingled together like honey in a hot tea and tasted just as sweet. He leaned towards me. We could do exciting things, Rebecca, you and me. I pressed my hands to my middle. Did he mean it? Would he be my wings to fly beyond Dawning Town? His usually lagged voice turned intense. You aren't like any girl I've ever met. You dream big. I like that. My arms wrapped all around my middle now. Did he mean what I thought he meant? He gathered my hands in his. After I take off the Huns, I'll come back to get you. We'll live in Dallas or New York or maybe somewhere in Europe. I can look around while I'm there. I sucked in the night air, closed my eyes, and for a moment envisioned all my dreams coming true. You'll be a celebrated war ace. I'll be a club woman with my name and picture in the newspaper every week. Tears pushed at the back of my eyes, but I refused to cry, even happy tears. My eyes flew open again as his fingers intertwined with mine. Tell me you aren't teasing me, Arthur. Tell me this is real. With a finger beneath my chin, he tipped my face up towards his. I wouldn't say it if I didn't mean it, Rebecca. He leaned close. I swallowed hard, his face now inches from mine, his breath caressing my cheek. My eyes fluttered shut. His hands landed on my waist before the fire of his lips shot through me. It was like nothing I had imagined or experienced before. Seconds passed, or was it minutes? It seemed ages, yet a mere flash of time. When he pulled away, I reminded myself to breathe. He draped one arm across my shoulders as if it had been there 100 times. I shivered once and nestled my head on his chest beneath his chin. We sat there silently, spinning our dreams until applause burst from the schoolroom. Arthur helped me to my feet. We tiptoed into the back of the room and clapped along with the others. Just as we suspected, no one imagined we hadn't been there the entire time. Arthur and I helped Mama and Mrs. Thatcher put the room to rights after the crowd had gone. Rebecca Grace? Mama called from the other side of the room, and she slipped her handbag over her arm. I think we're leaving. The whispered words scratched my throat as I turned to Arthur. He squeezed my hand, then let it go. Don't forget to write to me. His breath tickled my ear. Mama stopped near us, her company smile in place. I hear you are leaving us, Mr. Sampson. Yes, ma'am. Well, you be careful over there. Her gaze held his. I expect you'll come see us again when you can. The grin he threw in my direction tingled me from head to toe. That's my intention, Mrs. Hendricks. Mama's eyes remained on him, though she spoke to me. Say goodbye now, Rebecca. She offered a curt nod before charging out the door as if we hadn't a moment to spare. Would she forever treat me like a child? Goodbye, Miss Thatcher, Miss Sampson. I gave them each a shy curtsy before my eyes held a lingering farewell with Arthur's. Then I hurried down the steps and scrambled into the waiting buggy. Daddy slapped the reins. We jolted forward. I leaned out the buggy to look behind us. One last farewell, but Arthur was nowhere in sight, and already my heart ached with missing him. Alright, that was chapter 1. I hope to see you back here next Saturday for chapter 2. I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, leave me a comment below and hit the thumbs up.